There are some cases that get so much attention when they're first investigated, and then they just kind of fall to the wayside. The public becomes disinterested, and the case goes cold. This is one of those cases. This is the disappearance of Brian Shaffer. On April 2006, 22-year-old Brian Shaffer left his home in Ohio at around 7:30 p.m. Brian was a third-year medical student at Ohio State University College of Medicine, and he had just come from a day of classes. When he left his house that evening, he told his roommate that he was going to go out for some drinks with some friends and to expect him back around midnight. But Brian never came home. At around 9 p.m. the same evening, Brian walked into a bar called the Copa Room in downtown Columbus, Ohio. This was a popular bar amongst OSU medical students, and it wasn't unusual for Brian to go there. He ordered himself a beer and sat down at the bar where he met up with some friends. Brian was on surveillance tape entering the bar and ordering this beer, but he was never caught on camera leaving. It's important to note that while he did order a beer, Brian was actually the designated driver for the evening. So, although he did drink this one beer, he didn't plan on getting drunk. At around 10 p.m., after finishing his beer, Brian left the bar to go to the restroom. It would be the last time anybody ever saw him. Brian went into the men's restroom, which was located at the back of the bar. It had 3 stalls and 2 urinals. The toilets were in an L shape, and each stall had a door and a window near the top for privacy. After finishing his business, Brian walked out of the bathroom, turned towards the front of the bar, and vanished. This is not like he walked out the front door or stepped outside to smoke a cigarette or took off down the street. He literally disappeared within the bar itself. And it sounds crazy, but there were over 100 people in this bar, and nobody saw him leave. Nobody witnessed him go through any doors. Nobody heard him exit through any windows. And he definitely didn't blend into the crowd because Brian was 6'4" and 205 pounds. He was a white male with brown hair and green eyes, and he was wearing a navy blue jacket and a white t-shirt. He stood out. And again, remember, Brian was the designated driver, so he was not with any friends at this time, and there was no reason for him to sneak off or slip away from his group. There were no suspicious persons in the area, and nothing to indicate that Brian was planning on running off. And before anybody asks, yes, there was surveillance footage of him entering the bar, but for whatever reason, none of the cameras inside the bar worked. All of them were broken. This wasn't a case of Brian slipping out an emergency exit or walking out the front door unnoticed. There were no open doors or exits. He just vanished. Inside the bar, according to the manager, they checked all the storage rooms, the closets, under the tables and chairs. They even took apart the wall paneling to make sure he wasn't hiding in there. He was nowhere to be found. They continued looking for Brian until 4 a.m., and then they finally decided to call the cops. As the sun came up the next morning, the search began. Over 50 local, state, and federal investigators began searching everywhere. Brian's family joined the search, putting up thousands of dollars in reward money. Brian's mother spoke to the media. His father walked the streets of downtown Columbus holding up a picture of his missing son. Everybody wanted answers. The police had no idea where to start. They searched every inch of the Copa Room and the surrounding areas. They interviewed everyone who had been in the bar that night. They followed up on dozens of leads and tips. They even went back to Brian's school and searched his dorm room. Nothing. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the case went cold. We can only imagine the pain and agony Brian's family has gone through these past 16 years, not knowing what happened to their son, not having any answers. I can't imagine the torment of wondering if your son is out there somewhere, hurt and scared, or the fear that something terrible may have befallen him. My heart goes out to Brian's family. I hope they find answers soon. But let's talk about this case. What happened to Brian? How could he just disappear like that? Was there foul play involved? Did someone hurt him and then hide his body? If so, why haven't we caught them? Or is this some sort of elaborate prank gone wrong? Did Brian run off and join the circus? I know that sounds silly, but maybe he wanted to start a new life, reinvent himself. Why wouldn't he contact his family? Why wouldn't he reach out to anyone? Some theories suggest that Brian may have gotten drunk without realizing it. Maybe the beer at this bar was spiked. Remember, he was the designated driver, so maybe someone slipped something into his drink without him noticing. Maybe somebody slipped something into his drink in the bathroom. But if this were the case, shouldn't there be witnesses? Shouldn't somebody have seen someone slipping something into his drink or watch him stumble out of the bathroom intoxicated? No. What about the security footage outside the bar? Somebody could have pushed him out the door. Maybe there was a struggle. Somebody could have punched him and knocked him unconscious and carried him away. Again, no witnesses and no signs of a struggle. Another theory is that Brian wandered out an unlocked window. The Copa room had several windows and some of them were designed as emergency exits. Brian could have stumbled out one of these windows without anyone seeing him. But there were bars on the inside of these windows and Brian was a medical student. He was bright and he knew how to problem solve. It seems unlikely that he wouldn't be able to figure out how to get through the window. And finally, there's always the possibility that Brian's body is still inside the bar. Maybe his body is hidden behind the wall paneling or underneath the floorboards. The police did tear apart the bar, but they never tore down the wall paneling or dug up the floors. But if this were true, shouldn't there be some sign of decomposition? Wouldn't there be a smell? I've been researching this case for a few days now, and I can't seem to find any updates on it. In fact, the last update I could find was from 2008. It's baffling. Back in 2006, everybody was talking about it. Every news outlet was covering the story. But then, just as quickly as it started, everything stopped. It's like Brian just vanished from the headlines and from the minds of the public. I think about the countless hours spent investigating this case, the manpower, the resources. Do you think they spent over $50,000 on this investigation, or did they pull the plug after a few weeks? Do you think the police have a suspect? Do you think they know what happened to Brian? Hopefully they do, but they aren't telling us. And that's what's so frustrating about this case. Back in 2006, there was hope. Everyone had hope that Brian would be found. They held vigils and they put up reward money and they marched and they passed out flyers. But what is Brian's family doing today? Are they still holding on to hope, or did they give up? I really hope that they're still looking for answers because this is a young man who had his whole life ahead of him. He had dreams and goals. He had plans. And whatever those plans were, they were crushed the moment he walked into that bar. So here's what I want you guys to do. Leave a comment below. Let's bring Brian home. Let's put this case back in the spotlight. Let's generate some buzz. Who knows? Maybe somebody out there has information. Maybe somebody was at that bar that night and they saw something. Maybe they didn't back in 2006, but after hearing this episode, maybe it comes flooding back to them. If you have any information on this case, please contact the authorities. If nothing else, let's try and bring Brian's case to the surface, if only for a moment, because whether we know it or not, Brian's family is watching. They're listening, hoping that someday their nightmare will end. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this case as interesting as I did. If you did, please follow for more. Until next time.